Township Board of Trustees regular meeting. It is Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 at approximately 5:30 p.m. Mr. Burning, can we please have a roll call?
Mr. Burning.
Present.
Mr. Honolo.
Present.
Ms. Davis.
Present.
Every trustees present.
Thank you. Could I ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the 2023 tax budget public hearing. We have a public hearing regarding the 2023 tax budget. Mr. Gilbert, would you please give us your presentation?
Thank you, Ms. Davis. As the board is aware, as we do every July, in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code, we have to adopt the annual tax budget, which is comprised of the history of the receipts and expenditures for the years 2020, 2021, and actually the first 6 months expenditures of the current year, so 22, and the projected expenditures and receipts for the latter half of this year. Then also is the projected expenditures and receipts for 23. Again, as the board is aware, in our tax budget, we're very conservative in terms of our projections. So the reason being is, and we talk about this a lot, is unlike the federal government where we can't deficit spend, we have to make sure that we're living within our means so that our expenditures can never exceed our revenues. In looking, or available revenue anyway, not necessarily current year revenue. In looking at our tax budget, what we typically do is we conservatively project what our receipts will be, and then we overestimate what our expenditures will be so that we're never caught in a situation where we are appropriating more money than we have available revenue for. So that's what we've done this year again. So while it's called a budget per se, it really isn't our budget. It's a planning document, the way we use it in our budget cycle to allow us to estimate what we will be able to spend in the preceding year. And what the process is and why it's prescribed in the revised code is once it's adopted this month, it will then go to the county auditor's office, which the Budget Commission will then certify our revenues, and we will then have to request tax and rates be approved by resolution, at which point then the county will issue our certificate of resources, which will allow us to then model our appropriations after that, our temporary appropriations in January, and then our permanent appropriations in March. So it's just part of the normal budget cycle. However, it's called a tax budget, but it isn't really our budget that we use. Again, it's more just a guiding document and an instrument that we use to project revenues and expenditures based on trend data as well as expected information from this year as well as for 23. So I know that the board has been involved in this for many years, and you're aware of how we do our tax budget, but that's essentially the process. So unless there's any questions of the board, that concludes my presentation, but again, it's just a planning document.
Do you need a motion approving it?
No, you have a resolution later in the agenda that'll approve it, so unless there are any questions of the public.
Any questions?
No question. None for me.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Next, we have minutes for approval from the regular session on, yes.
I apologize to interrupt you, but I think during the public meeting, we should ask if there's any questions, and then we would need to close the public hearing. And
Perfect. In light of Mr. Gilbert's presentation on our 2023 tax budget, is there anyone in attendance this evening that would like to ask questions or comments about his presentation on the 2023 tax budget? Thank you. There are none. Do I need a motion to close the
just a roll call vote to close
Okay.
the public.
We need a motion, then a roll call.
Yeah.
Motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Need a roll call, Mr. Burning?
Aye.
Mr. Honolaw?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Public hearing is closed.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Okay, so next we have minutes for approval from the regular session on June 14th, 2022, and minutes from our regular work session on June 28th, 2022. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Burning, may we please have the financial report?
Yes, Ms. Davis. For the month ending June 30th, 2022, the township expenditures were $1,758,431.67, and receipts were $269,007.66. That gives us an ending cash balance of $26,576,608.47, including obligations for expenditures, payroll, regular operating costs, ongoing capital improvement projects, and investments. What I request is a motion to approve the receipts, warrants, payroll expenditures, update and current revenue, and reports for the period ending June 30th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And I just want everyone to know that our financial reports are available at the administration offices during regular business hours or on our website 24/7. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Burning. Mr. Gilbert, would you give us your update on departmental action items?
Yes, the first I have is a liquor permit hearing request for 9172 Winton Road. It is a request of Kaka Foods. Ms. Kennedy was anxious for me to verbalize that name in the public meeting.
What's the name of it again?
Kaka Foods,
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Davis. So unless there are any, do we have any objections?
None from the police department.
Okay. With that being said, I would entertain a motion to send the requisite paperwork to the Division of Liquor Control.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The next item I have is the board is aware, we've talked in work sessions regarding this, and it's becoming more and more imperative that we utilize social media to communicate with residents and the community at large. And given the current bandwidth of our staff's time, and in order to grow our capacity to utilize social media to communicate all things Springfield Township to the community, we sought out the help of different social media experts, and in speaking with the two staff people that we have now, Kim and Kathleen, who handle all of our social media, they are very busy with other things, and instead of hiring an additional person as a township employee to help with communication, we thought it would be wise to seek out and maybe look at an independent contractor. So what you have before you today is an independent contract agreement between the township and a company called Bubbly Engagement. This individual has significant experience. Allison Dardinger is her name. She has a lot of experience when it comes to social media marketing, branding, and the like. And we are looking to contract with her to provide up to 20 hours a week, or 20 hours a month of social media work, and helping us disseminate information via those various platforms, both our brand, our communication, what information we feel needs to get out to our community. So for about $12,000 a year, we're looking at working with Allison to help us in that regard. So with that being said, I would entertain any questions, but what I'm specifically looking for is a motion authorizing me to sign an agreement with Bubbly Engagement or Allison Dardinger for the remainder of this year at a rate of $50 an hour for a maximum of 20 hours a month.
Okay, and I see that it looks like there's provisions in here that either side can terminate this
Sure.
agreement
Yeah.
for all the standard reasons.
Yes.
So moved.
Seconded. The other thing is, I think it's important for us to, because our township is so spread out, I think it'll help to have somebody focused on this and making sure we're getting the word out, whatever's going on here, whether it be new development or just events going on here, because a lot of times I think people just don't know about what's going on. I talk to people and they're like, oh, that was last week, I didn't know, or whatever. Maybe they aren't engaging with our website or whatever. I think this will help us get to more people.
Well, 100%. And, having two teenagers, one soon not to be a teenager, I can tell you that people a lot of times don't think of local governments as businesses, but we absolutely are. And we're competing for resources, whether it be residents or businesses locating here. And I guarantee you, everyone in this room generally either looks for products or finds out about information about things they want to buy through social media, whether it be Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever it may be. We have to make sure that we're on those platforms because we are competing for residents with other communities. We are competing with other communities regarding where businesses will locate. So the more that we can make our brand and people aware of Springfield Township, I think the better we're going to be from an economic development standpoint. So that is a big part of this. And, imagery, information is all part of it. And it is vitally important that we make sure that we're on those platforms and that we're utilizing them on a consistent basis, and more importantly, in a very consistent way as well.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
The last action item I have is a request to authorize the administrator to sign an agreement between the township and Hamilton County for the application to the Southwest Ohio Regional Transit Authority for funding and construction and maintenance of improvements to Galbraith Road between essentially Winton Road and the cross-county ramps. So this agreement just outlines what the county will be responsible for and what the township will be responsible for.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Looking at the personnel update, we had the resignation of Christian Miller as a part-time EMT firefighter, the resignation of Jeremy Burns as a full-time medic firefighter, the rehiring of Anthony Ligori as a part-time EMT firefighter, and that essentially means he went from part-time to now he's in one of our 1820 positions. And then, unfortunately, we did have the passing of one of our full-time firefighters, Steve Hayden. So that was an untimely death, and our department, as well as Colerane's department, because he did work part-time for Coleraine. So we do miss Steve dearly, and it was not an on-duty death. However, nonetheless, it is a loss, and the department is, again, missing Steve at this point in time. No activity in the police department right now. We did have a new hire in the Public Works Department, Neil Rutherford, as a part-time 1820 laborer. And that concludes the personnel update, and now I'll turn it over to Kim for community events and programs.
Thank you. On Friday, July the 29th, we have a concert, a smaller concert on the back deck of the Arts Center that we're calling Pups in the Park, where we'll have different vendors selling and promoting items for dogs, and the band for that is the Cliff Tones, which is a reggae band. And then starting August the 26th, we'll begin our movie night series. So we'll have one August the 26th here, and then another one on September the 9th, and that will be at Clifford George Park.
At where?
Clifford George Park.
Thanks, Kim. The board has copies of the departmental activity reports, so unless there are any questions of those, that concludes my report.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. There are 7 resolutions before the board, for tonight for consideration. First resolution for consideration is resolution number 54-2022, adopting the 2023 tax budget. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Seconded?
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next is resolution number 55-2022, authorizing private sale of unneeded and unfit for use property in the police department. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next is resolution number 56-2022, a resolution authorizing Michael Gould, Director of Infrastructure and Development, to execute and file an application on behalf of Springfield Township with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources for possible funding assistance. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next is resolution number 57-2022, declaring nuisances pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 505.87 at various listed properties within Springfield Township and authorizing statutory actions necessary to abate the nuisances. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next is resolution number 58-2022, establishing assessment for abatement of nuisance and certifying same to the Hamilton County Auditor. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Do we,
The next two resolutions, and yeah, Laura, if you want to jump in here, as to why we're doing these two resolutions versus how we would do previous process.
So we're going to, we have our dangerous property condition hearings, the way we have them. We always did them with more due process than the statute allowed, just because we thought that was important. But the way the statute has changed in the last year or so, I think it's time for us to comply with the statute, which is, I still think it has a little less due process, but it has some nuances that I think we want to make sure that we capture. So we're going to start complying with that completely, and that sounds bad, but we used to always give people a hearing.
We would go,
Regardless of whether they asked for it or not, we would schedule the
we would
hearing.
go above and beyond what the
Right.
code would require. Now we're going to follow the strict letter of the code.
Yes, so the way it's set up now is, and matter of fact, at the work session, the board set a hearing date for this, the Second Avenue property already. We're going to vacate that August 9th hearing because the statute doesn't have us do that. So what the process is we're going to do our initial resolution, which declares it to be a dangerous property condition based on the evaluation of a fire chief or the Board of Health or the building department, depending on which entity is involved. So we will make the initial declaration in a resolution. At that point, the owner and the lien holders get the notice that we made that determination. They then get an opportunity in the next 20 days to ask for a hearing. So if they ask for a hearing, then we will set an official hearing. If they don't ask for a hearing, then what we'll do is the board will reconvene at its next meeting, consider the matter, and then still evaluate whether there's sufficient, whether there's been any changes or whether there's some reason for you to determine that it is not a dangerous property condition at that time, at which point you'll change your resolution and you'll likely not declare it. More likely than not, it won't be fixed in that time and you'll just move forward. So we've always done 2 resolutions and a hearing. Now it's going to be 2 resolutions that are slightly modified and maybe or maybe not a hearing where the owner participates. So we were always doing it in an abundance of caution, just scheduling the hearing, and if the person came, they came. That's not what the statute requires, and the timing is a little different, so we want to make sure that there's no concern that anyone doesn't get, the due process they deserve. I still think we're above and beyond what they needed, but.
We already gave them a hearing, didn't we?
Well, on Second Avenue, we did have this before us, there was a hearing before
Right.
us. And we gave the person additional time.
That they didn't follow.
They didn't follow.
Right.
So, but
So we've already given them a hearing, basically.
they have had a hearing on that property.
That was last,
That was
Last fall,
year.
yeah.
Last fall.
I think it was April. I think it was April 13th.
Over a year ago.
over a year.
Yeah,
We gave them
so-
30 days to comply at that point, or
There's a
so.
little more, there's like 60 days, but since there's been so much passage of time, I thought it made sense to start over on that property, because there was, initially, if you recall, we required them to put a fence around that property, they did
Which
put the
they
fence
did.
around. They did make, overtures that they were going to try to fix that property.
Yeah, they had a contractor here that was gonna do work, and now it's over a year later, and
And they indicated they hired a structure, our
Yes.
concern was we felt it couldn't even be rehabbed at all. They indicated that they had a structural engineer who said, yeah, it could be. So we were asking them to get that report, we were asking them to comply with the building department. And like I said, there were some starts. It seemed like they might be doing something, but it never came to fruition. So at this point, the property is worse than it was previously. So, but you're right, Mr. Brady, we did have a hearing, and the property owner was here on that.
Which we'll revisit again.
Yes. So, but before our view as a board and the township has always been that if we're going to just demolish someone's property, we're going to make very certain that it needs to be demolished. And that's.
and give them every opportunity to
Absolutely.
stop that.
And, and the statute, and we gave hearings before the statute even required it, just because that was our feeling, is that you're taking away someone's property right, and you're not going to do that unless you're abundantly sure there's no way to fix it. But on the flip side, you can't let
Absolutely.
dangerous property sit there, because it can certainly harm the residents, especially kids.
They don't become less dangerous over
They do
time.
not become less dangerous, and they become more attractive to children the more abandoned they are. So, so it's time to move forward with this one, but that's the difference in the resolutions that the board sees. We did have, the fire chief did go back in the last month and look at it. You have that in your materials, so it is not better.
We're just not going to schedule the hearings unless the property owner requests.
And they will get a notice that's mailed out, certified mail tomorrow to them and the lien holders, advising them of their right to request a hearing.
What if the notice comes back unclaimed, what do we do then, or?
The statute requires you to send it out. We also are going to post it on the property. The statute doesn't require that, but again, we're trying to make sure we get the information to people. So on this one, no one's living there, so we have an address that's.
I hope not.
So there's an address that's different than,
But we also send it to all lien holders of record, so it isn't
Right.
just going to one place.
yeah. And it is posted, so oftentimes that gets people's attention too.
And then we'll take action at our August meeting.
Well, you're going to do the resolution here, but, and it depends on whether they ask a hearing,
Yeah.
what happens next. So
Right.
there will be action taken at the next meeting unless we agree on a different hearing.
Right.
Do we have a motion?
Well,
She has it
I
ready.
haven't
You
read
haven't read the
it yet. I haven't
resolution
read the
Oh,
resolution.
I thought you read it. Just moving forward, sorry.
Next is resolution number 59-2022, resolution declaring a dangerous property condition at 2046 Second Avenue and ordering the removal of buildings or other structures located on that property. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded?
Mr. Bernie?
Aye.
Mr. Honolo?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next is resolution number 60-2022, resolution declaring a dangerous property condition at 1402 Amesbury Drive and ordering the removal, repair, and securance of buildings or other structures located on that property. Do we have a motion?
Before we do a motion on that, I just want to advise you, because this happened before you came. The Assistant Chief Bro, who's here this evening, he did go out and check out that property today, because I realized we had not updated the board on this property. I have some pictures, it's gotten worse. If the board recalls, this property has been a subject to actually a case in housing court that's been going on for several years as well.
I see that was in court March 15th.
And we're still in court for that. We've actually entered into a sort of an agreement in the case. The owner has indicated he will not contest the removal of the pool and the deck and securing the windows and doors to this house. He's indicated he will move out in the next 30 days. So we'll see. This one,
This isn't a removal of the structure itself.
this is not, the structure is not structurally defective, however, it is insecure. There's no water to it right now, water's been shut off, the gentleman's still living in there. It is absolutely, the health department has condemned this property because of the condition inside. Raccoons are living in there, other varmint are living in there, and as I said, there's an individual living in there without water. So it is a problem. What we are doing is the deck is defective. We're going to remove the deck. And the pool has collapsed in on itself and there's debris in it and we're going to remove that. And then the intention is to secure the windows and the doors board them up until such time as something else can be done. So,
This one wasn't before us, though.
we did not do a dangerous
We had a
property.
different pool case.
We did. We've had several
That
pool
was-
cases.
This is different.
Going
This
back
is-
6,
Yeah.
9
This,
months.
up until now, this has been a property maintenance case before Hamilton County Housing Court.
Yeah, and we were hoping we could resolve that there, but it's not.
It looked different, yeah.
Yeah, and it is getting steadily worse.
It looks-
Mike Gould
The pool's terrible.
yeah. And the deck is it's gonna fall down on somebody at some point. And part of our concern was with the person living there, demolishing the deck while someone's living there is, especially if the person is not really aware of what's going on, could be dangerous to that individual. So this one's been a little more difficult, and everybody's been very diligent on pursuing it, but it's, as I said, this one's been a problem. So at this point, the individual who lives in this house has gotten an attorney. We've kind of worked some things out with the attorney, but I'm not sure how that's going to go, but
So do we know if the person who's residing there is the actual owner of the property?
he is, yes. Yes, he is. He owns the property. So it's a sad situation. And he's not left despite the condemnation order. I mean, the public health has been after him to move out, and that's not happened either. So we're hoping that will happen in the next 30 days, but we don't know. But regardless, what we conveyed to him and his attorney is that the township can wait no longer on the deck and the pool. It presents a problem to the neighbors, so. And I want to thank Assistant Chief Bro for going out there today just to make sure we had an update. But it's gotten worse.
So moved.
Did we read it?
She did read it.
I read it.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honlaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
And I think you should just, I don't know whether at the work session you officially adopted the August 9th hearing date, but I think you should probably do a motion to vacate that date.
Okay.
Do we have a motion to vacate the August 9th public hearing?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Abrams. Is there any old business before the board this
I do
evening?
not have any.
I do not have any.
Is there any new business before the board?
Not today.
We come to our citizen participation part of our agenda. If there's anyone who is in attendance today who would like to speak and address the board, please step to the podium and state your name and address. Good evening.
My name is Lakita Carter, and I live at 10928 Crystal Hill Court.
You have the floor.
Okay, so when COVID came around, of course, that was a hard time for everybody. There was an issue with the basketball courts over in Seven Hills neighborhood. I don't know if you guys are familiar where the old elementary school used to be. And somehow the basketball rims got taken down, and it was a long time for them to bring them up. And I called and called and called, and they kept telling me because of COVID, they had to wait. So I took it upon myself to go ahead and purchase a basketball hoop for my home for my kids. There are a lot of kids over in Seven Hills. We have pretty much became the neighborhood house because unfortunately, or fortunately, my kids play ball, and they are 15 and 14, and most of the neighborhood knows my kids. I am the coach of a girls' basketball team for AAU, and both my kids, again, play ball. So I got this basketball hoop. It's been there since 2019, never had an issue at all. Now, this year, there is a neighbor that lives across the street. She became ill, and her daughter started coming over and helping her out. So probably about middle of May, she started calling the police saying that the kids were interrupting her peace of mind coming down the street as she was going over her mom's house. And I've tried my best to reach out and talk and work with the Springfield Township. I think I've also sent numerous emails to Chief Officer, I think it's Art Bly, never got a response back from him at all. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know what else I need to do. So they came, Springfield Township came and put a sign on the basketball hoop saying that it had to be removed because this lady called twice about the kids playing. Well, I went around to all of the other neighbors, and they love it. Even the lady who was sick, who her her daughter taking care of her, she had no problem with it all the way up till she got ill. There was no problem. So the Springfield Township came and they put a sign on the basketball hoop, said it had to be taken down or they was going to confiscate it because of her complaining. And she is the only one that complains. And I've tried everything. I'm always home, I work from home. So I make sure the kids clean up after themselves, they have garbage bags, they have everything they need to do just to make sure that everything is peaceful. But she constantly calls just because she does not want to see the kids outside playing. So now, of course, she has this name that the kids call her Karen. She's a Karen because she's always calling. And I'm just like, I try to rectify it the best that I can. So then I started getting harassed by an officer before the May the 30th sign was supposed to come down. He came right in front of my house, parked in my house. And I came outside like, hey, what's going on? He's like, well, your basketball hoop has to be removed. I'm like, why? It says May 30th. He was like, well, who told you that? I said, the sign right here, it says May 30th. And then he was like, well, now the hoop is in the streetway. I'm like, well, that hoop's been there for 3 years. It's always been right there. I don't understand. So I just feel like I started getting harassed by him. So then he made me move the hoop because he said if I don't move it because it's in the streetway, that he's gonna have someone come and get it. So I went around the neighborhood, and now Crystal Hill is a cul-de-sac. And there is Pleasant Hill, and there is Misty Hill. There are not cul-de-sacs. And there are several other hoops that are out there that are literally in the streetway. And I know they get more traffic than we do because we're in a cul-de-sac. And I asked them about it, like, hey, why you guys are not bothering saying something to them? If you're going to say something to me, say something to everybody. He said, well, we're not going to do that if we don't get phone calls. And I'm like, well, that's not fair because it's only one person that's calling that's causing this issue in our neighborhood. I mean, on our street. No one else has an issue about it at all. And I just really think that it's unfair that I'm trying to make sure that these kids have somewhere to play because, again, when they finally did put up the basketball hoop over by the school, there was some fights. A couple of the kids got threatened, told by other older guys that they had to move off the court because they wanted to play a game of basketball and told them if they didn't move, they were going to shoot or kill them. And then there was a killing there. So I felt like, hey, my kids are right here. All the kids are right here. All the mothers know where their kids are. And everyone in my street allow their kids, their grandkids come over. I have a huge backyard. I have a trampoline that I got for the neighbors. So my house is pretty much a safe haven house for the neighborhood kids. And I really don't think it's fair that me paying taxes in my area that I have to move my basketball hoop for someone who doesn't even live there. She stays in Indiana. It's her mom's house.
We're familiar with the issue you're describing.
Okay.
And basketball hoops are one of many issues we get similar things with. So whether it be zoning enforcement, you heard us talking about dangerous properties and property maintenance codes when, in previous part of the meeting. And a lot of times what happens is, and that officer's right. We don't typically go out and just try and take people's basketball hoops unless we're getting complaints about it. It is a violation. I mean, you're not allowed to put things in the public right of way. And the reason is, obviously, it's not safe to have kids playing in the street, ideally, right? In an ideal world, it wouldn't be safe to have them in the street. And we're not allowed to allow people to put things in the right of way either. We have liability if we were to allow things to remain in the public right of way. So there is that. But we typically don't go out and just try and enforce things when we're not getting complaints about it if they're not egregious issues. So the officer is correct in that the reason we're speaking to you about your basketball hoop because we did receive complaints about it. And it's my understanding that he did talk to you several times about put it in the driveway and just put it in the driveway until the issue with the neighbor that's complaining goes away. But if it keeps being moved out into the street and we keep getting calls, then we're going to have to take action. We can't just say, yes, it's a violation of the law, but we're just going to ignore it. So we have to take action if we keep getting complaints about it. So if you want to make a complaint about the other ones that are in the right of way, the rest of the neighborhood, we can go and do the same thing to them as well. So that's fine. We don't have an issue with enforcing it equally. We were just trying to work with you to make sure that until the complaints stop, just keep it in the driveway. If the lady were to stop complaining for whatever reason, then, go back to business as usual and we'll continue to pretend like we didn't see it. But clearly that's not happening. She keeps calling, so just keep it in the driveway until the calls go away and then possibly move it back. So we're not singling you out for any other reason than, unfortunately for you, you have the neighbor that's calling and complaining and forcing us to enforce the law. We get this about a lot of other things. It isn't just basketball hoops, whether it's speeding or whether it's, somebody put up a fence where they weren't supposed to, or whatever the issue is. We get complaints about it all the time, about different things that people are saying, well, you're enforcing it against me. I drove around the township and found 15 other cars that were parked in the grass. What are you going to do about those? Well, again, it's a big community. We don't go out and proactively enforce some things. We do it on a reactionary basis. Again, unfortunately, you just have the neighbor that seems to want to call all the time. Hopefully that stops. Hopefully whatever happens, maybe the property sells and we don't have that issue anymore. But until then, if they keep calling and push us to enforce the law, we're going to have to do that. And if you want us to do it equally throughout the neighborhood and go tell everyone else in Seven Hills to move their basketball hoops out of the right-of-way too, we can do that as well. But that's the issue. We're not singling you out. We don't want to make your kids not have to play basketball. We just have someone, you have to understand our position. It is a law, and they're pushing us to enforce the law. We can't just tell them we're not going to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And so,
But when I did, I'm
excuse
sorry.
me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I understood you correctly, the person who's calling and complaining is not a resident of the township?
It's not.
Okay, and she does not reside in that location, so does that matter? Does that make a difference at all?
No.
Okay.
Not from identifying us of a violation and asking us to enforce it, no.
What really happens is, in any jurisdiction, no one has the staff to proactively go out and enforce every law in the books. So what jurisdictions typically do is they say, look, some things are so important that we're going to enforce those. Absolutely, like dangerous properties. If we see a house falling down and it's going to, kill children or something, we're going to go out there and we'll see those. Our people will report those. The police will report those when they're on the beat. If it's not something that is going to be incredibly dangerous right away and can be managed, then we're not going to proactively, as Chris said, we're not going to proactively look for it. No one does. And there's lots of zoning violations in every jurisdiction around here. Just you don't enforce them until they come to come in as a complaint, or you happen to see them, or you don't have no one pays someone to go to every property and check and make sure they're complying with all the laws. It's just not possible. So the law recognizes that there's going to be some quote-unquote selective enforcement based on labor, based on just the sheer number of people out there and the sheer number of potential violations. I've been doing this with this township since 1993. Basketball hoops have been a problem since then, and we've tried to deal with it a bunch of ways. And just really what the board has said is like, look, if we're not having any issues with, sometimes we've had issues where kids are blocking the cars, right? We'll get calls from motorists who don't live
They
in the
won't move out of
township.
the street.
They won't move out of the street, so we'll have to go enforce that one, because we're like, you gotta get out of the street. And then sometimes we'll have it based on noise, which is kind of what you have, where some neighbor can't stand the sound of the dribbling and the kids playing, and we're like, okay, well, they can't be there, and we'll have to enforce it at that point. So it doesn't feel good, I understand that, but that's what Chris says. If you want to make a complaint as to the other ones, and you tell us where they are, we'll have the same obligation with regard to those. It's kind of like potholes, right? You don't have an obligation to fix a pothole until you're told of it. Once you're told of it, you got to go fix the pothole, because we're not required as a jurisdiction to drive around and look for potholes. Same thing, not required to drive around and look for basketball hoops up and see if they're in violation. But once we know there is one and it's a problem, then we have to have people get rid of it.
Yeah, I did make that complaint and said that to the officer that did come out. And he said, I know exactly what you're talking about. I drive past that hoop every day, but I don't get complaints, so I'm not going to enforce it. Well, I told you about it.
Well, that's
just like
not the
you just
same
told
as-
you, that's the same
If
thing.
you want
I
to
would
make a
think.
complaint about it, that's different than telling him about it. So, if you officially want to make a complaint about it, then they'll have to take an action on it.
Okay.
And you certainly can do that.
But again, our hope, which is why, we haven't taken the hoop thus far, is our hope is that this issue with the neighbor across the street somehow gets resolved, however that happens. The property gets sold, this person stops coming over there, whatever the issue is. And then, again, you can go back to doing what you were doing before and no one's complaining, right? So my advice would be maybe see if that happens. But if you want us to go around and remove every hoop from every right-of-way in Seven Hills, we'll do that.
Okay. Appreciate it.
All right?
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for coming.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the board tonight? Seeing that there are no one else. Is there any other business before the board?
None for me.
Not for me.
I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Meeting is now
Thank you.
adjourned. Thank you all for coming.